Welcome back to the Rise of the Zodiac Book Club. Today we are looking at a part of reading that usually disappears when it works, how a set of locked stories becomes a book without the publishing process quietly changing what belongs in it.
So we are not reviewing a story today. We are looking at the chain of responsibility around stories.
Right. Our approved material gives us one documented pattern. Production freeze contains a freeze identity and a registry of plan manifest, and those artifacts separate publication selection from downstream rendering.
That is the evidence boundary. We can explain the function of that separation. We cannot claim which production freeze is current at the time someone hears this, and we cannot claim printer acceptance or supply printer-specific values.
Then the listener-facing question is, what changes when locked stories become publication derivatives, and what authority must remain unchanged?
Publication derivatives sounds technical.
It can be simple. The story source is one thing, a frozen instruction about which stories belong in a collection and in what order is another. A laid-out book made from those instructions is a third. They are connected, but they do not have the same job.
We will take those one at a time, test one unsafe shortcut, and end with why the structure matters to a reader. Start at the beginning. What do we mean by a locked source?
In this project's approved framework, the creative source is not rewritten to make publication easier. Publishing may arrange, format, and render approved material, but it does not gain authority to alter tenant.
That sounds obvious until a practical problem appears. A line wraps badly. A heading is inconsistent. A tool expects a different shape.
And that is exactly when the distinction matters. A software inconvenience does not become creative authority.
I would write the first rule in the center: the source remains itself. Everything downstream has to adapt around that.
Does locked mean the source never appears in another form?
No. A book interior is another form. The point is that a derived form must preserve the authority of its input. Layout may change page breaks, typography, or navigation. It may not silently change story membership, order, or content.
So locked is not untouchable by any process. It is not creatively revised by the process.
That is a useful distinction. The source can be read and transformed into a publication artifact, but not rewritten as though formatting were authorship.
And it gives us a stable question whenever something changes downstream: is this a change in presentation or a change in authority?
The source tells us what each story is. It does not necessarily tell a renderer which collection to build. That brings us to the frozen selection authority.
They are approved research documents that a production freeze contains a freeze identity and a registry that plan manifest. Tells artifacts separate selection from rendering.
What does separate selection from rendering mean in ordinary terms?
It means the renderer receives a decided list instead of deciding the list. The publishing decision has been fixed upstream. The rendering tool follows it.
And the freeze identity?
It identifies the frozen authority being referenced. We should not go beyond that function here. This episode does not establish which specific freeze is current at script time.
So we can say why a freeze identity exists without naming an operational winner.
Exactly.
The registry to plan manifest provides another link in the chain. It allows a registry entry and its plan to be checked against each other as documented authorities.
Again, function rather than inventory.
Yes, we do not need to read internal fields aloud. The listener needs the concept, the collection, identity, and a plan that lists its approved contents are connected before layout begins.
Why not let the renderer look at the whole archive and choose whatever matches a category?
Because then membership would be recalculated during rendering. The approved structure exists specifically to keep that decision upstream.
A renderer is good at making a document. It is not automatically the authority on what the document should contain.
That is the second rule: selection arrives decided.
And if someone wants to change the selection,
that request belongs upstream, where its authority can be reviewed and frozen again. It should not be smuggled into a formatting run.
Now the third layer, the derivative.
This is where presentation work happens. The approved plan can become a structured interior with front matter, a table of contents, story openings, page numbers, and other layout features.
We should keep those as general examples of publication form, not claims about a particular print-ready file in this episode.
What is allowed to change at this layer?
The arrangement on pages. A title may appear in a designed heading. A story may begin on a fresh page. Navigation can be added. Page numbers can be calculated. Those are features of the derivative.
And what is not allowed to change?
The derivative does not gain authority to recalculate membership, replace the frozen order, or alter love story content.
So the visible book may be new, while its content authority is inherited.
Precisely. The derivative adds form, not canon.
That phrase is compact enough to remember.
It also explains why the layers need different checks. You would validate story identity differently from page layout.
Yes, as a general authority principle, but we should not turn this discussion into a checklist of current production status. Which printer-specific values remain pending confirmation is still an open question.
Then we stay with the stable distinction: source authority, selection authority, presentation derivative.
3 layers, 3 jobs. Confusion begins when one layer quietly takes another layer's job.
Let's test that. Imagine a rendering process receives a collection request and decides to rebuild membership from whatever metadata happens to be available at that moment.
It might even produce a plausible book.
Plausibility is not the same as authorization. There are both design trees that shortcut as prohibited because it recalculates a decision that should arrive frozen.
On the board, the safe chain is locked source frozen plan derivative. The shortcut draws a new arrow from the archive straight into the renderer and lets the renderer choose.
What could go wrong without inventing a story about an actual failure?
We can state the structural risk. The output would no longer be demonstrably governed by the frozen selection authority. We do not need to claim that such a failure occurred.
And even if the recalculated list happened to match, the process would still be wrong because the renderer made a decision it was not authorized to make.
That is the key insight. A matching result does not repair a broken authority chain.
Could a formatter ever report a problem with the plan?
It should report a problem when they cannot safely follow the plan. Reporting is not recalculating. The issue can return upstream for resolution.
So the choice is not between blind obedience and silent improvisation. There is a third option: stop, document, and ask the responsible layer.
Exactly. A trustworthy process knows both what it must do and what it lacks authority to do.
Then the unsafe shortcut changes our understanding. The freeze is not merely paperwork stored before rendering. It is the boundary that prevents layout software from becoming an accidental editor. 2 questions remain open in the approved packet.
First, which production freeze is the current rendering authority at script time? This dialog does not answer that.
We have discussed the function of a freeze, not designating a current one.
Correct. Second, which printer-specific values remain pending confirmation? That also remains unanswered here.
Those questions do not weaken the architectural distinction we have established. They define operational details that require their own current authority.
And because this is a book club discussion rather than a live production status report, we do not fill the gap with internal notes.
We also do not call a derivative accepted by a printer just because it was designed with printing in mind.
Correct. Local corroboration and external acceptance are different claims.
The honest stopping point is enough. The documented pattern separates flocked source, frozen selection, and downstream rendering. Current freeze identity and printer values remain questions for the appropriate production record.
Let's collect the chain once.
First, the locked source preserves the creative authority of the story. Second, the frozen plan carries the approved selection into production. Third, the publication derivative adds form without gaining authority to revise the first two layers.
The unsafe shortcut is recalculating selection during rendering. Even a plausible result would not make that authority transfer legitimate.
And we preserve the two open questions, which freezes current at script time and which printer-specific values remain pending. We have not claimed either answer.
The process sounds technical, but the principle is human. Decide in the right place, preserve the decision, and make the downstream work accountable to it.
When a finished book feels effortless, it is easy to forget how many boundaries protected it.
Those boundaries matter because the reader should encounter the approved stories, not a renderer's reconstruction of what might be wrong.
The source remains itself. Selection arrives decided. The derivative adds form.
That is how collections become books without letting the machinery become the author. The best publishing architecture may be mostly invisible to the reader, but the trust it protects is present on every page.